The night I saw her, I had no reason to be afraid. There was no thunderstorm, no full moon casting long shadows through the trees, no flickering lights or slamming doors. Just a quiet, cold evening in Seattle where the air was damp and the sky hung low like a curtain of gray. I was 21, freshly moved out of my parents' house, trying to prove that I could make it on my own, even if that meant living in the basement apartment of an old Victorian house in Capitol Hill beneath a stranger I barely knew. I thought I understood fear. I'd seen horror movies. I liked them even. I thought I knew what unease felt like. The rustling in the dark, the sound of footsteps on empty streets. But I didn't know what true fear was. Not until that night. Not until I saw her. I had just finished watching a horror film. Something deliberately disturbing. The kind of film you don't admit you watched alone. I don't even remember the title. Just the feeling it left behind. The lingering sense of dread that settled into your bones long after the credits rolled. I turned off the TV and looked around my one-bedroom apartment. Small, cramped, but mine. It had an old charm to it. Scuffed hardwood floors, a crooked ceiling fan, yellow-tinged walls that hummed in silence when the furnace kicked on. I wrapped myself in a blanket and crawled into bed. The kind of exhaustion I felt wasn't just physical. It was emotional, the kind you get after weeks of pretending you're fine when you're not. Living alone had been harder than I expected. The silence, once welcome, had started to feel like a weight pressing down on my chest. That's probably why I kept hearing things. At first, it was just a light creaking, easy to blame on the pipes or the old floorboards above. But I remembered seeing that the car in the driveway was gone. The guy who lived upstairs wasn't home. It was just me. I rolled over, told myself I was being paranoid, and tried to drift off. But then came the soft sound of footsteps. Too slow, too purposeful to be anything mechanical. They didn't echo from above. They came from the hallway just outside my bedroom. I sat up, listened. Nothing. I stared at the door for what felt like an hour. It was closed, but I could see a sliver of light beneath it from the hallway lamp I always left on. I told myself I'd imagined it, that my brain was playing tricks on me. I almost believed it. Then the hallway light flickered, once, twice, and then it went out. A bolt of cold panic shot through my chest. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My ears strained in the silence for any sound, any hint that I wasn't alone. And then came the knock. One soft knock on the door, followed by the quiet creak of it opening on its own. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared as the door opened slowly, revealing nothing at first, just the darkened hallway, the shadowy outlines of picture frames and coat hooks. Then she appeared. At the end of the hallway, a woman, standing completely still. I couldn't make out her face. Her hair was long, black, hanging like wet vines around her shoulders. She wore something loose, maybe a gown or dress, I couldn't tell. But what I will never forget was the way she stared at me. She didn't move for a long time, just stood there, watching me from the shadows. Then, slowly, so slowly it was almost unreal, she began to walk backward. Backwards. Still facing me. Still staring. Not a single step out of rhythm. I couldn't take it. I leapt out of bed, slammed the door shut, and locked it with a force I didn't know I had in me. My breathing was erratic, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my ribs. But she didn't follow. There were no footsteps, no sounds of her running toward the door. Instead, I heard a different sound, the faint creak of the stairs leading up to the front exit, followed by the click of the door at the top and the sound of it slamming shut. I didn't sleep, not a minute. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, shaking, too afraid to check if she was still there. In the morning, I searched the apartment. Every room, every closet, nothing. It was a small place. If she had been there, she was gone now. I called my landlord that afternoon, told him everything. I expected him to laugh, to write me off as another anxious tenant in an old house with creaky floors. But he didn't. He listened, carefully. And then he told me something that still turns my blood cold. He called the upstairs tenant, the man whose car hadn't been in the driveway. When he came home later that day, he came down to my door to apologize. The woman I saw, she wasn't a stranger. She was his ex-girlfriend. She'd been unstable, he said. Obsessed. She'd shown up uninvited before, tried to get inside the house, but that night she must have broken in through the side entrance. She was trying to find him. She found me instead. I moved out a month later. I didn't tell my parents why. I didn't tell my friends. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass dimly lit hallways or see the shape of a figure too still to be natural, I remember her. The woman in the shadows, still staring, still walking backward, and still waiting. When my mother died in the fall of 2019, the silence in our house became unbearable. It wasn't just grief, it was emptiness, a kind that echoed through the walls and filled the corners of every room. My dad did what he could. He tried. He made breakfast even though he couldn't cook. He packed lunches. He remembered birthdays, took time off for school events. But over time, I saw it wearing him down. He started talking less, sitting longer at the dinner table after everyone else had left. I knew he was lonely. So when he met Kathy, I tried, honestly, to be supportive. She came into our lives like a gust of perfume and practiced smiles. I remember the first time she walked through the front door. Her voice was sugary and too loud, her hug too tight, her eyes scanning the living room like she was memorizing where everything went. There was something in the way she smiled that never touched her eyes, something just beneath the surface that made my skin crawl. But I said nothing, because my dad was smiling for the first time in months. At first, she was just visiting once or twice a week. Then she started spending the night. Before long, her things appeared in our closets. Her toothbrush sat beside his. And then one afternoon, I came home from school and found cardboard boxes in the hallway. My father looked up sheepishly and said, "Kathy's moving in, sweetheart." That night, I barely touched my dinner. I wanted to believe it was just adjustment, that I was being dramatic. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. Kathy had a way of moving through our home like she'd always belonged there, but there was no warmth in it. She took over things that weren't hers. She sat in my mother's armchair like she owned it, rearranged the kitchen drawers, took down family photos, and replaced them with abstract art that didn't match anything. The first time something felt truly wrong was the afternoon I caught her in my dad's bedroom when he wasn't home. The door had been left ajar, and I saw her crouched by his closet where he kept his safe and personal documents. She didn't hear me at first. I just stood there, watching her. When she finally turned and saw me, she didn't jump or explain. She just smiled. "Oh, hey, sweetie," she said in that too bright tone. "I was just looking for an old photo album." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked away. Later that night, I told my dad. He listened, nodded slowly, and said, "She probably really was just looking for something, honey. You've got to give her time." I wanted to scream. Instead, I kept quiet, but I started watching her more carefully. A few days later, I got home from school early and walked up the stairs. As I reached the top, I saw Kathy coming out of my little brother Max's room. She jumped slightly when she saw me and smiled again. "I was just opening the window," she said. "It's so stuffy in there." I waited until she went downstairs before checking for myself. The windows were shut, both of them, not just closed, locked. I told my dad again. He sighed. "I know you don't like her, Mia, but please just be patient. She's trying." Trying. Like invading private spaces, lying to my face, creeping around when no one's home? That's trying? I stopped talking to him about it. What was the point? No one was listening. Not even him. 2 weeks later, he had an overnight shift at the hospital, and I came home from a friend's house without warning. The house was quiet. My youngest brother, Caleb, was supposed to be asleep upstairs. I tiptoed in, wanting to see what Kathy did when no one was watching. I didn't have to wait long. From the kitchen, I heard it. Caleb crying, but not normal crying. Frightened, panicked sobs, the kind I hadn't heard since he was a newborn. Then I heard her voice. Harsh, sharp, full of rage. Shut up right now! I stormed into the living room and found her standing by his playpen, fists clenched, teeth bared. The moment she saw me, her face went slack. No smile, no excuse, just silence. I didn't speak. I picked Caleb up, held him tight, and stared at her. She backed out of the room and disappeared down the hall. I called my dad. He listened, said he'd talk to her. I don't know what they said. I only know what happened that night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable sound of my bedroom door creaking open. My heart seized. I rolled over and saw a figure just standing there, half hidden in the darkness. Then, without a word, the figure stepped back and quietly closed the door. I jumped out of bed, ran into the hallway, and saw the door to my dad's room just closing. I knocked hard. He opened the door, groggy. Kathy lay in bed beside him, eyes closed. She was just in my room, I hissed. I saw her. He looked at her, then back at me. She's been here the whole time, he said. Go back to sleep. I went back to my room and locked the door. I didn't sleep a second. I don't know what she wants. I don't know who she really is. But I know one thing. She doesn't belong here. And I think she knows that I know. There's a certain type of silence that only exists late at night in a place like Miami. The traffic slows to a low hum. The streets breathe out the heat of the day, and the city begins to whisper instead of shout. It was during one of those rare, quiet nights, warm, still, and deceptively calm, that I realized how quickly comfort can turn to terror. I had owned my condo for about 3 years at that point. It was on the second floor of a mid-sized building tucked between high rises and older homes in a quieter neighborhood just outside of downtown. I loved that place. It had a balcony that overlooked the small parking lot, and beyond that, a line of palms swaying gently over the sidewalk. I worked from home doing software development, so I spent a lot of time on that balcony, especially at night when the air felt less heavy and the only light was from the moon and the warm orange glow of nearby street lamps. That night was no different, at least at first. I had my laptop propped on a small table, a glass of water beside me, and my feet resting comfortably on the railing. I was responding to a few final emails before finally allowing myself to shut off and just breathe. It was a little after 10:30 p.m. when I first heard it. Yo! It wasn't aggressive. Not yet, just loud enough to be heard over the chirping crickets and distant city noise. I didn't react at first, probably someone on the sidewalk talking to a friend. Hey, you up there? That made me pause. I turned my head and looked down toward the parking lot. A man stood just in front of one of the cars, one I didn't recognize. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a white tank top and dark jeans. A backwards baseball cap sat crooked on his head, and he was staring directly up at me. Yeah, you, he said, pointing. Come down here. I want to show you something. His tone was off, playful almost, but with an edge I couldn't quite place. I tried to keep my voice calm, casual. I'm good, man. Have a nice night. I turned back to my screen, pretending I wasn't rattled, but my fingers had stopped typing. That's when he laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh that follows a joke or an awkward moment. It was sharp, deliberate, like he was laughing at me, not with me. Then his voice dropped low, and everything about him changed. I'm gonna come up there and skin you alive, you little prick. I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Who says something like that? But when I looked back down, his face was twisted into a smirk that sent ice down my spine. He wasn't joking. I stood up slowly, grabbed my laptop with one hand and my glass with the other, and backed through the sliding glass door into my living room. I shut it gently, then locked it. My heart was starting to race. I waited, watching the shadows through the blinds, half expecting to hear him yell something else. But nothing came. A minute passed, then two. I told myself he'd probably gotten bored and walked away. Then came the knock, not at the balcony, at the front door. It wasn't a knock, really. It was pounding, fist after fist, hammering into the wood like he meant to break it down. And behind it, his voice, raw, guttural, slurring threats and curses I can't repeat. Every word vibrated through the floor. I backed away, my phone shaking in my hand as I dialed 911. "I'm calling the police," I shouted through the door. He didn't stop. In fact, the pounding got louder. Then came a new sound, something dragging across the door. Scraping, carving, metal on wood. He was using a knife. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it, this unmistakable sound of a blade tearing into the door's surface, slow and deliberate. I pressed my back against the wall, phone to my ear, trying to keep my voice calm as I gave the dispatcher my address. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. One final bang, a guttural growl of a curse, then silence. I crept forward and peeked through the peephole. He was gone. By the time the police arrived, I had calmed enough to speak clearly. I showed them the door. Several long gashes etched deep into the wood, still fresh. One of the officers nodded grimly. They took my statement, said they'd patrol the area, but told me it wasn't likely they'd find him unless he came back. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even sit down. I kept every light on and stood near the window, watching the lot until the sun came up. The next morning, I called a locksmith, installed a security camera, and reinforced the door with an additional deadbolt. I've seen crazy people before. Miami isn't short on them. But this wasn't just random madness. It felt personal. Like he had chosen me the moment I made eye contact. Like something in him had snapped, and I had become the target of a violence I didn't deserve and couldn't predict. For weeks, I avoided the balcony. That little slab of concrete that once felt like my sanctuary suddenly became a threat. Exposed, vulnerable, watched. Eventually, I sat out there again, but I never let myself relax the same way. And I never forgot the sound of that laugh. It was the kind of sound that doesn't leave you. The kind that makes you check the locks twice, maybe 3 times, just in case. It's strange how easily your life can take a detour, how one stupid decision, one unlucky night, can open the door to a kind of danger you never thought you'd face. I was 22, working part-time and living with my parents just outside of Sacramento. I wasn't a troublemaker, not a fighter, but that didn't matter the night I ended up in jail for a crime I didn't commit and brought home something far worse than a criminal record. It happened after a night out with friends at a downtown club. The kind of place that's too dark, too loud, too packed with sweaty bodies trying to forget the week. I wasn't drunk, not really, just loose enough to enjoy myself. That's when I saw her, an ex from a year back. We hadn't spoken since we broke up, but I didn't think there was any bad blood between us. Apparently, I was wrong. Because within 20 minutes of arriving, a bouncer approached me and told me to leave. No explanation, no questions, just a firm hand on my shoulder. I resisted, confused, and maybe I raised my voice too much. That's all it took. There were cops stationed right outside. They saw the commotion, and within minutes, I was handcuffed and sitting in the back of a squad car. The bouncer claimed I had touched her and her friends inappropriately. I hadn't. I hadn't even spoken to her, but no one wanted the truth. They wanted quiet. So I spent the night in jail. That's where I met Troy. He was already in the holding cell when they brought me in. Mid-30s, shaved head, neck tattoos, broken front tooth. He barely looked up when I walked in, but as the hours dragged on and the cold metal bench dug into my back, we started talking, or rather, he started talking. Asked what I was in for. I told him. He laughed, said I didn't look the type. Told me he was in for possession, though he didn't say what. He was oddly friendly, in a way that felt performative. I was still buzzing with adrenaline, so I talked more than I should have. I told him where I lived, general area, not the exact address. I told him my parents were out of town for the weekend. Told him we'd had people over before going to the club. I even mentioned my last name when venting about how the officers handled everything. He listened, quietly, asked questions here and there. I didn't think anything of it. The next morning, we were both taken to court. I went before him. He sat in the back row, listening as they read my full name and charges aloud. My judge dismissed me pending further review. I walked out with paperwork and a future court date. And I never looked back at Troy. That was my mistake. That night, I was home alone. I didn't tell my parents about the arrest. No way I could. I told them everything was fine, that I'd be staying in. It was a warm night, and I'd left a few windows cracked open downstairs. The house felt still, quiet, too quiet. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard it. Footsteps, outside, on the gravel, slow, crunching. I froze on the couch, TV muted, breath held, more footsteps, then whispering, low, more than one voice. I crept to the front window and peeked through the blinds. Two men. One of them was unmistakably Troy. They were walking along the side of the house, checking doors, trying windows. My blood turned to ice. I backed away, heart pounding, and shut every window I could find, locked every door, killed the lights, and ducked behind the kitchen island. They circled the house slowly, deliberately. I heard one of them try the back sliding door. It was locked. Finally, after what felt like an hour, I peeked out the front window again. They were gone. No smashed glass, no forced entry. But the message was clear. I never called the police. Maybe it was fear, maybe shame, maybe because I knew what they'd say. He was your cellmate? You gave him your name and location? I didn't even tell my parents. I just waited for them to come home. I stopped sleeping properly, started checking every window before bed, triple locked every door. Troy never came back, but I know he could have. And I'll never forget how easily I handed him the information he needed. A stranger, a man in a holding cell, a name, a neighborhood. One late-night Google search was all it would have taken. It wasn't the night in jail that haunted me. It was the night he stood outside my house, calm, patient, and ready. I've never been one to believe in signs. I'm the kind of person who explains everything away. Cold breeze, draft, flickering light, loose bulb, weird dream, stress. That's how I've always protected myself. Rationality was my shield. But what happened the night the picture fell made me question everything I thought I believed. It wasn't just a coincidence. I know that now. My name is Rachel. I'm 23, born and raised in Providence, Rhode Island. And until recently, I thought I had complete control over my life, my decisions, my heart, my future. But grief has a way of cracking your foundation, and love, or the illusion of it, has a way of crawling through those cracks when you're at your weakest. I met Spencer through a coworker at a bar. He was charming in that effortless way some people are, charismatic, funny, a little edgy. We hit it off quickly, and before long, he was coming around for family dinners, weekend outings, lazy Sundays. My parents were neutral about him, but my grandma? She saw right through him. He's no good, she told me, more than once. There's something behind his smile, a shadow. I used to roll my eyes when she said things like that. She always talked like she had some kind of second sight, like she could feel things the rest of us missed. She never liked Spencer, not even a little, but I didn't listen. I thought she was just being protective. Over time, I started seeing what she meant. Spencer had a temper, not all the time, but enough that it scared me when it flared. He never hit me. But there was a moment during an argument when he raised his hand like he might. Then he stopped. But that pause, that hesitation before he pulled back, it changed everything for me. I ended it that night. Grandma was relieved. She didn't say I told you so, but her eyes did. She told me I was brave, that I deserved someone better. That she'd pray I never looked back. Then, a few weeks later, she died. It was sudden, a heart attack in the early hours of the morning. I didn't get to say goodbye. Didn't get to tell her how much I really listened, even when I didn't want to admit it. I was devastated in a way I hadn't known was possible. The house felt empty without her voice, her prayers, her warnings. To feel close to her, I printed my favorite picture of us, me hugging her tightly, her laughing with her eyes nearly shut, and framed it. I hung it above my bed. It became my comfort, my reminder, my protection. And then Spencer texted me. I don't know why I replied. Maybe because I missed something familiar. Maybe because grief makes you crave comfort, even when it's toxic. We started talking again. He apologized, said he had changed, and I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. We met for coffee, then dinner. Then he came over. Within 2 weeks, we were back together, though I kept it quiet from most people. I wasn't proud of myself, but he seemed different, softer, more patient. For a while, I let myself believe it was real. Then came the night, everything unraveled. We had just spent the evening watching a movie at my place. He left around midnight. I was tired but content, confused but hopeful. I climbed into bed and stared at the photo of my grandma above me, whispered goodnight like I always did, and turned off the light. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a sharp crack. I sat up, heart racing, eyes struggling to adjust to the dark. I reached for the lamp, flicked it on, and looked around. The picture. It had fallen. The frame lay face down on the floor, glass shattered, a jagged piece sticking out at an angle. I climbed out of bed and picked it up. The nail was still firmly in the wall. The hook on the back of the frame was intact. There was no draft, no movement, nothing that should have caused it to fall. My hands started shaking. As I stared at the broken image, my grandma's face now split down the middle, I felt a chill wash over me. Not a cold breeze, something deeper, heavier, like a warning. I barely slept, and the next morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Spencer, told him I wasn't ready, that we needed space, that something felt wrong. I expected him to be hurt, maybe even disappointed. But what I got instead was rage. He screamed at me, accused me of playing with him, of being manipulative, of leading him on. Every word he spoke was soaked in anger, the same old edge I had tried to forget. The change had been a mask, and it was slipping. I hung up. Then I looked at the broken photo again, and I wept, not just for the mistake I had nearly made, but for the clarity I had lost when I ignored the one voice that had always told me the truth. Grandma had seen him for who he was from the beginning, and somehow, even after she was gone, she was still watching out for me, still warning me. Some people might call it coincidence, say the picture just fell, but they didn't hear the way it broke the silence like a scream in the night. They didn't feel the air shift. They didn't hear her voice echo in their mind saying, "You can do better." I did. I still keep the picture, reframed, repaired, and placed back above my bed. Every night I look at it, I remember what I nearly walked back into. And I remember who pulled me out. Even from the other side, she didn't let me fall. I've always been most alive when I'm alone. Give me the open sky, a dirt trail, and the sound of tires crunching over rocks, and I'm at peace. I'm not antisocial. I just find comfort in solitude. There's something about being completely self-reliant in the wilderness that makes the world feel honest again. No noise, no pretenses, just you and whatever the world decides to throw at you. That's what drew me to off-roading, and that's what led me to the edge of something I'll never be able to explain. My name's Jake. I'm 32, and that night, I was somewhere deep in the Red Feather Lakes region of Colorado, following a trail known as Dead Man's Road. I'd done it once before with a group, but this time I wanted to tackle it solo. I took a few days off from work, loaded up my Jeep with snacks, gear, and a thick sleeping bag, and hit the dirt. The trail itself isn't too technical, rough in places, narrow in others, but manageable if you know what you're doing. I made good time, stopping occasionally to take in the view. Jagged hills, dense pine forests, and a golden sky that looked like it had been painted for my eyes alone. As the sun began to fall behind the trees, I pulled off the main trail, maybe 40 or 50 yards into a small clearing that seemed untouched. It was perfect, quiet, still. I set up the back of my Jeep like I always do, folded the seats down, unrolled my sleeping bag, stacked my supplies within arm's reach. No tent. I don't need one. The car is my shelter. I left the windows cracked slightly for air and flicked on my Jeep's LED bar to flood the clearing with a soft white glow while I got situated. I ate a couple of protein bars, scrolled through a few offline maps on my phone, and then finally crawled into the bag. I left the LED bar off when I settled in. Just the stars and a bit of moonlight filtered through the trees. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the hum of insects and the occasional rustle of a branch. And then I heard something I wasn't prepared for. A voice. Faint. Maybe 50 yards out. It wasn't the voice itself that scared me. It was the fact that it was there at all. No one should have been out there. Not at that hour, not that deep. It was a short burst, maybe a laugh. I wasn't sure. Could have been the wind, I told myself. A bird call, something normal, something safe. Then I heard it again, closer this time, a voice, clearer now. Hello? I froze inside the sleeping bag, barely breathing. It sounded almost childlike, but not in a natural way, more like an adult mimicking a child's voice. The pitch was off, too light, too playful. My Jeep was parked with the front facing back toward the trail, meaning the rear window pointed toward the trees. I turned my eyes toward it, afraid to move anything else. Come out! The voice floated through the night air, no more than 20 feet away now. I waited, body stiff, every nerve on high alert. I wanted to sit up, crawl to the front seat, start the engine, and get the hell out. But I couldn't bring myself to move. Then, the voice changed again, this time louder, closer. It came from just outside the window. I snapped. I launched myself forward, crawling over the center console and into the driver's seat. My foot slammed the brake as my hand twisted the key. The headlights blazed to life, illuminating the trail ahead, and nothing else. I slammed the Jeep into drive and took off down the rocky trail, headlights bouncing, tires grinding over loose gravel. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see who or what might be following. I didn't stop until I hit the paved road 2 miles down. I drove for another hour until I found a small motel on the edge of a town I'd never planned to visit. The woman at the front desk didn't ask why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. She just handed me the key. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the motel bed, still wearing my jacket and boots, staring at the ceiling like I had in my Jeep. But this time, I wasn't at peace. I was shaken to the core. I've tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was someone lost in the woods. But if they needed help, why laugh? Why whisper? Why didn't they approach the Jeep when it was still with the lights on? Why did they wait until I was vulnerable, half asleep, in the dark? I've camped solo dozens of times since, but not in Colorado, not on Deadman's Trail, and never again without a weapon close at hand. I used to think the woods were where I could escape the noise of the world. But now I know something else lives out there in that silence. Something that waits until you're sure you're alone. Something that calls out, not to be found, but to lure you closer. And maybe next time, it won't knock on the window. Maybe it'll open the door. I've always loved the house I grew up in. It wasn't fancy or new, but it had character, the kind that made it feel alive. The hardwood floors creaked in familiar patterns, the walls held the smell of old books and baked bread, and the basement always had a presence. Not a ghostly one, not exactly, just a heaviness. A coldness that never went away, even in the dead of summer. I'm Hannah. I was 19 when it happened. I still lived with my parents in Kansas City, Missouri, while attending community college. That night, they were out running errands. grocery store, I think, and I had the house to myself. I was upstairs, sitting cross-legged on my bed with my laptop in front of me, working on a paper for my history class. The only sounds were the hum of the fan and the occasional tapping of my keys. Then I heard it. Hannah? It was my mother's voice. I paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Yeah? I called back, assuming they'd returned home earlier than expected. No answer. I waited a few seconds, then stood up and poked my head into the hallway. The house was quiet, eerily so. No footsteps, no rustling bags, no doors closing, just silence. I called again. Mom? Still nothing. I figured maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was a neighbor through an open window. Maybe I'd just been too deep in concentration. I went back to my room and sat down. A minute later, I heard it again. Hannah, come downstairs. Her voice was clearer this time, but still calm, completely ordinary. Only this time, it came from the basement. I stood up again, my stomach tensing. Mom? I called down the stairs. Yes, she replied. Come down here, sweetie. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Not the words themselves, they were gentle, familiar, but there was no change in tone. Like she was repeating a recording, exactly the same as before. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, staring at the basement door. It was slightly ajar, like someone had nudged it open. I pushed it wider and reached for the light switch. Nothing. The bulb had burnt out. The stairs below were swallowed in blackness, only faintly lit by the ambient glow of the kitchen behind me. I stood there, unsure if I should laugh at myself or run. I wasn't a superstitious person, but something felt wrong, deeply wrong. Mom? I tried once more, my voice more cautious than curious now. Hannah, she said again, exact same tone, exact same pause between syllables. Come down here. I shouldn't have moved. I shouldn't have gone anywhere near that door. But I did. I took one step down, then another. The air was colder. The deeper I went, the more I felt it wrapping around my skin like mist. I reached the bottom and stood in the darkness, trying to let my eyes adjust. There was no sound, no movement, just the buzz of the house's silence. Then I heard it again, closer. Hannah. I turned toward the far end of the basement, where an old crawlspace door stood open. She couldn't be in there. No one could. It was barely large enough to fit a child. I called out, Mom, this isn't funny! But there was no reply this time, just the stillness and the open crawlspace. I took one step toward it, crouched down, and peered inside. Pitch black. No breathing. No shifting. Just black. That's when something inside me screamed, Run! I stood up so fast I knocked into a storage shelf. A few boxes tumbled down behind me, and I didn't even stop to look. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the door shut behind me, and locked it. My whole body was shaking. I grabbed my phone and called my mom's cell. She answered on the second ring, the sound of carts rolling and beeping scanners in the background. Hey, honey, what's up? I couldn't form a full sentence at first. I told her what I heard, what I saw or thought I saw. She was quiet for a moment, then chuckled nervously. You've been watching too many scary movies. Maybe the wind pushed open the crawlspace door. But the wind doesn't call your name, and it doesn't do it in your mother's exact voice. When they got home, my dad went down into the basement with a flashlight. The crawlspace door was still open. Nothing inside, no footprints. No signs of forced entry. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much for the next few weeks. To this day, I don't know what I heard. Maybe it was a hallucination brought on by stress. Maybe it was something else. But I've never gone back down into that basement alone. Because whatever was calling me that night, it wasn't my mother. It knew my name. It knew the voice that would make me follow. And I think if I had taken one more step into that crawl space, something would have pulled me in, and I wouldn't be telling you this now. I was only 9 years old, but I remember that afternoon as clearly as if it happened yesterday. It was the first time I realized that being alone doesn't just mean quiet. It can also mean exposed. And sometimes the people who seem like they need help the most are the ones you should fear the most. My name is Tyler. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, a place where oak trees drip with Spanish moss and everyone knows their neighbors. I spent a lot of weekends at my grandmother's house, a cozy one-story home tucked at the end of a quiet street. She loved cooking, had a bright yellow front door, and always stocked the pantry with my favorite cereal. Her house was the safest place I knew. That's what I told myself, right until the day I answered the phone. It was a gray, rainy Saturday. Thunder grumbled in the distance. Grandma had gone to the grocery store for ingredients to make beef stew, and I'd begged her to let me stay behind and watch cartoons. I had no idea that was a bad decision. She hesitated, then agreed, reminding me to stay inside and not open the door for anyone. I nodded, feeling proud that she trusted me. I was in the living room, cross-legged on the floor, watching SpongeBob and eating dry Fruit Loops from a bowl when the phone rang. Not the cell phone. This was the landline, that old beige phone with the spiral cord that sat on the kitchen counter. I probably should have ignored it. But I was 9, and 9-year-olds are curious. And besides, the ring kept going, and something in me wanted to show I could be responsible. So I answered, "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end. Then a man's voice, calm, maybe in his 30s, I couldn't really tell. "Hi there, is your mom or dad home?" I told him no, not really thinking. "I'm at my grandma's." Another pause. "So you're alone right now?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach clench. His voice wasn't friendly anymore. It was slower, almost pleased. I didn't answer. Then he said something that made me go cold. "Just making sure this is 4126 Oak Ridge Drive, right?" He said the address like he was confirming it. Not asking for it, confirming it. I hung up the phone without another word. My heart was pounding. My hands felt clammy. I didn't know exactly why it scared me so much, but it did. I stood frozen in the kitchen, listening to the rain hit the windows. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe it was nothing. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Not a polite knock, not casual, panic knocking. I muted the TV. My stomach dropped. A man's voice called out, panicked and raspy. "Please, someone help me, please." I crept to the edge of the hallway, just far enough to peek around the corner at the front door. Through the top window pane, I saw him, soaking wet, hands on the glass. The moment he saw me, he locked eyes with mine. "Little boy, please. I need help. I'm bleeding. I'm hurt bad." I didn't see any blood. He wasn't clutching his stomach. He wasn't limping. He was just staring. Something inside me screamed, "Don't open the door." I dropped out of sight, crawled behind the couch, and pulled a throw blanket over me like it could protect me. I didn't have a cell phone. Grandma didn't even own one. I didn't know what else to do but wait. My heart felt like it was going to explode. He kept pounding. "Come on, kid! I'm not gonna hurt you!" I cried silently under the blanket, hugging my knees, trying not to make a sound. Then the pounding stopped. For a second, I thought it was over, but then I heard knocking on the window, the one right behind me. His voice came again, softer now, almost whispering. "Please, I just need to come inside." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Eventually, it all went quiet. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. I don't even know how long. Then I bolted down the hallway, locked myself in Grandma's bedroom, and hid under her covers, eyes fixed on the door. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. Because the next thing I knew, Grandma was shaking me awake. I burst into tears and told her everything. She hugged me tightly, and I remember how tight her arms were around me. She called the police, who came quickly. I had to tell them everything I remembered, his voice, what he said, how he looked. They searched the area, but they never found him. At least, no one ever told me if they did. Grandma never left me home alone again. and I never answered another house phone if I didn't recognize the number. Now I'm older, and I understand what I didn't then. That man had called ahead to make sure I was alone. He came to my door pretending to be a victim, but he was the predator. If I had opened that door, even just a crack, he would have walked in. And I don't think I would have ever walked out. There are moments as a parent when your instincts switch on before your brain has a chance to catch up. When something feels off and you don't know why, but your body reacts before your thoughts do. I'd always trusted that instinct. It helped me be the father I wanted to be. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that afternoon. No gut feeling, no overprotective worry, no past experience. Because how could you ever expect to find a stranger in your child's bedroom? My name is Eric. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Minneapolis, Minnesota, with my two boys, Jordan and Keith. Their mom, my wife, was out of town that weekend visiting family, so it was just the three of us at home. Jordan, the older one, was always out with friends. I barely saw him between pickup games and school stuff. But Keith, 10 years old, imaginative, kind, sensitive, was a homebody. He loved his action figures, building Lego castles, pretending he was a superhero. That day was just like any other. Or it should have been. It was a Saturday, and I decided to take a quick nap in my bedroom. The house was quiet, except for the occasional slamming of the storm door. I remember whistling at Jordan once to stop making so much noise. But after the fourth slam, I sat up in bed, frustrated. The slamming wasn't just annoying, it felt out of rhythm, like someone was coming and going too often, too quickly. That's when I started hearing a thumping noise. It came from upstairs, from the direction of Keith's room. A steady, repetitive sound. At first, I thought it might have been him dropping something, maybe playing too rough. But it kept going, over and over again, like someone hitting the wall. I got up, still groggy, and started walking toward his room. The moment I stepped into the hallway, the noise got louder. Thud! Thud! When I pushed the door open, I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. The light in the room was dim, and for a moment, my brain refused to process it. There was a man in my son's room. A grown man, standing with his forehead pressed against the wall, repeatedly banging his head into it. Blood had smeared across the paint in a dull red arc. It was like he didn't even feel it, like he was completely disconnected from his body. His arms hung limp at his sides. His back rose and fell with each breath, but it was erratic, shallow. And worst of all, he was smiling. I froze for a second, caught between shock and rage. Then something moved in the bed. Keith. He had been hiding under his covers, too afraid to cry out. The second I saw him, the shock melted into something primal. I lunged at the man, tackling him to the floor. He didn't resist. He just kept smiling, kept mumbling nonsense, words that made no sense, phrases repeated over and over like a broken record. Stop the lights. They won't let me out. Stop the lights. I pinned him down, shouting for Keith to go get the house phone. My son ran. I kept the man pressed into the carpet, his body slack but his voice still steady, still muttering like a radio stuck on a single corrupted station. It took the police less than 10 minutes to arrive, but it felt like an hour. When they burst into the room, I stood up, my knees sore, my hands shaking. They restrained him. He didn't fight, he just laughed. Later, they told me he was likely schizophrenic or severely drugged, possibly both. He had no ID on him, no connection to our family, no clear reason for choosing our house. He had broken in through the back door. It hadn't been locked. A mistake I'll never make again. The officers assured me he would be taken somewhere to get help. But that night, I didn't care about him. I cared about Keith, about how close that stranger had come to him, about what might have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. Keith wouldn't talk about it for days. And when he finally did, he asked me one question. "Dad, how long was he in my room before you came?" I didn't have an answer. I don't know if the man had just arrived or if he'd been there for minutes, watching Keith in silence before starting to hurt himself. That's the part that keeps me awake at night, the not knowing. Since then, we've installed a full security system. Cameras, motion lights, every door and window gets locked every time. But no amount of security can undo what happened. Because once you see something like that, once you hear the sound of a stranger's skull hitting your child's bedroom wall, you don't forget it. You don't unsee it. And no matter how many deadbolts you install, a part of you never feels safe again. I've always had trouble sleeping. Even as a kid, the dark never quite felt empty to me. It felt full of shapes that didn't belong, of whispers without mouths. Over the years, I learned to manage it. Breathing exercises, melatonin, white noise, but nothing ever fully stopped the night from creeping in when it wanted to. And when it did, it came quietly, wrapped in shadows, and left me paralyzed. Literally. My name is Sophia. I'm 21 now, a student at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I've been dealing with sleep paralysis since I was 15. Most episodes are terrifying, sure, but in predictable ways. Feeling trapped, unable to move, seeing something out of the corner of my eye. But what happened to me last fall was something entirely different. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. It felt like a visit. It started during midterms. I was drowning in assignments, pulling all-nighters like they were a rite of passage. I'd barely slept for 3 nights straight, just enough to keep my body moving, but not enough to reset. On Thursday night, I finally finished my last paper and collapsed into bed, still wearing jeans and a hoodie. It was past 3 a.m. I remember the clock because it glowed red across the room, just above the bookshelf. I didn't ease into sleep. I crashed into it. The dream, if that's what it was, came on immediately. I was in a building, long and narrow, dimly lit. The walls were made of old stone, and every door I passed was slightly ajar. Inside each room were bowls of candy. Halloween candy. That part stuck with me. Bright wrappers, plastic pumpkins, even fake cobwebs in the corners. It should have felt harmless, childish even, but it didn't. It felt like I was being led somewhere, like something was waiting. But I wasn't there to trick or treat. I was running. Something was behind me, just out of sight. And I could hear it laughing, not menacingly, not mockingly. It was the laughter of a child, pure and rhythmic like a skipping rope song. But it followed me everywhere I went. No matter how many rooms I passed, how many corners I turned, the laugh was always just a few steps behind. Eventually, I reached a door at the end of the corridor. Unlike the others, it was shut. When I opened it, I woke up, but not really. I knew I was in my bed. I could see the ceiling, the outline of my posters, the soft ambient glow from the streetlight leaking through the blinds, but I couldn't move. I tried to blink. Nothing. Tried to scream. No sound. My chest was heavy, like something was sitting on me, pressing the air out slowly, deliberately. Then I heard it again. The laughter. This time it was inside my room. I moved my eyes, slowly, painfully, toward the center of the room. 4 figures stood there. A man, a woman, a young boy, a little girl. They were holding hands. All of them. They weren't moving. They weren't breathing. They were just standing in a perfect line, smiling at me. And their smiles were wrong. Too wide. Too many teeth. Their eyes were too big, too white, too still. They looked at me like I was prey, like I had been chosen. They didn't speak. They didn't move forward. But the pressure on my chest grew stronger. I was choking on my own breath, screaming inside my mind for my body to wake up. Then they started to shift. Not walk. They glided toward me, still holding hands, their feet never touching the floor. Their feet left. That laughter, that impossible echoing laughter, surrounded me from all directions. I thought that was it. I thought this was how people died in their sleep, frozen and unseen. And then, just as they reached the edge of my bed, I screamed. Not in my head, out loud. The paralysis broke, and I sat up with a gasp so sharp it tore my throat. The room was empty. The figures were gone. My blankets were soaked with sweat, my pillow wet from silent tears. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I went to the campus health center. I told the nurse practitioner everything. She listened kindly, then suggested I see a sleep specialist. I did. I was diagnosed again with chronic sleep paralysis and mild night terrors. They gave me new medication, breathing techniques, a referral to a therapist. It helped a little. I still get episodes, but never like that night. I haven't seen them again. But I know they were real, or as real as something like that can be. Maybe they were born from stress, or trauma, or my own exhaustion. But maybe they weren't. Maybe they come to people who've opened some invisible door, people who stay up too long, wander too far into dreams, or let the darkness linger too close to the edge. I still have nightmares, but I don't fear them the same way. Because nothing I see now can compare to the feeling of lying in your own bed, fully awake, watching something that shouldn't exist drift toward you, smiling, as you realize there's nothing you can do to stop it, except wait and hope it leaves you alive. Each of these 10 stories revealed a terrifying truth. Fear doesn't always hide in the dark. It walks beside us in broad daylight. From basements in Kansas City to off-road trails in Colorado, from strangers at our doors to voices that sound too familiar, the horror came not just from ghosts or monsters, but from the ordinary twisted into something unforgettable. These weren't just stories, they were warnings. Real moments when intuition saved lives, when silence spoke louder than words, and when the smallest decision made the biggest difference. The lesson is simple but profound. Always trust your instincts. Whether it's a stranger's voice that doesn't feel right or a door left slightly open, your gut often knows what your mind is too slow to catch. Listen to it. Protect your space. Stay aware. If you felt chills tonight, help us keep creating more gripping stories by subscribing to the channel. Your support keeps the lights on and the nightmares coming.